we are presenting a webinar on how 3 organizations have adapted their field operations during COVID-19 using mobile tech or other technologies. So excited to get into that. Before I introduce them, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on why we are talking about this topic. So obviously we are in some unprecedented times right now, and with COVID-19 and the global pandemic and lots of restrictions on travel, and all of this has forced organizations to really reimagine the way that they operate, especially those organizations that are doing a lot of work in their communities. This tends to be a lot of nonprofits and social enterprises, because much of the program activities and the day-to-day work happens in the field with community members. And it's especially kind of an impact because who they work with might not have access to smartphones or regular internet connectivity to easily switch over to Zoom calls to stay in touch. Some other organizations might be providing critical services that must continue. For example, if you're working in healthcare or sanitation, and so even though there are restrictions, the work must go on. So to keep up with this critical work, organizations have really had to kind of reimagine and adapt their operations. And as operations adapt, so will systems, because my view is that systems are tools to help facilitate those operations. So at TaroWorks, we're especially interested in this dynamic between operations and systems because we provide a mobile app for organizations to coordinate with their field agents in near real time, even when they're working in areas with little to no connectivity. So we've been monitoring how our clients have reimagined their field operations and how they've been reimagining how they use mobile technology or other technologies as well. And for me, I'm really inspired and optimistic about the adaptations that I've seen, to hear about what changes organizations have made so that they can continue doing their good work and serve these vulnerable populations. So for today, we want to provide an event and a platform for a few of them to share with you some of what they've done. So hopefully it helps you organizations out there working with communities at the last mile to get ideas and maybe share what you're doing. So for today, we are joined by, from Soil Haiti, we have Erica Lloyd, who's the Director of Research and Innovation. From Solar Sister, we have Alicia Oberholzer, the Impact Associate. And from the Solidaridad Network, Jessia Murcia, who's the ICT Development and Program Specialist. So thank you all for joining. And Alicia is on vacation actually, so special thanks to you for joining and sharing your thoughts. I'm sure people will be very excited to hear that. So welcome everyone. You'll learn more about each of these organizations when I hand it over to each of them. So in terms of the format, each organization will kind of present on what they do and how they've adapted their operations. So we'll just do kind of 3, one after another. And then I'll pause at the end of each for you to ask your questions. So before I hand it over, just some housekeeping rules. In terms of the questions, you can just type it directly into the Q&A portion of the GoToWebinar platform. You can also raise your hand and I can unmute you. Otherwise, everybody will be on mute by default. And then lastly, this session is being recorded and you can find the recording on our TaroWorks blog, and we post it onto our YouTube channel as well. And we'll also follow up with a recap. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over, and first up will be Erica Lloyd from Soil. Erica, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Elaine. And you can start my slides. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. I am going to start by giving a very quick overview of Soil Service before diving into discussing our COVID response. Next. So our mission is to increase access to safe sanitation in urban Haiti. Why? Because it is literally a life or death situation. So we have developed a social business using dry container-based toilets to meet this need. Next slide. There are many reasons that investing in traditional infrastructure for flush toilets and sewers or septic systems aren't appropriate in the communities that we serve. Next slide. So we instead install portable dry container-based toilets, which you can see kind of back there on the right-hand side of that photo, where waste is collected inside the toilet in removable, sealable containers. And rather than using water to flush this toilet, we provide a dry cover material that's made with agricultural waste, but about the texture of sawdust. And that's used after you use the bathroom to keep your toilet smelling fresh and clean and hygienic, and preventing flies and insects and other vectors. So that cover material keeps your toilet pleasant. Next slide. We provide a weekly service to collect the full containers, provide the families with clean, empty ones, as well as replenish their cover material supply. Next slide. Those containers are then transported to our waste treatment site. Next slide. Where those containers are emptied into bins where we treat the waste with thermophilic composting. Next slide. So through that process of composting, we are able to kill all of the dangerous pathogens that are in waste and transform it into beautiful, rich agriculture grade compost. Next slide. Which we then sell to local farmers. So that's a very quick idea of the service that we're providing. And now I will dive into talking about the impact of COVID. So prior to COVID, we relied on our collectors knowing where each individual household was and how their collection routes ran, just kind of memorized in their head. So every time we installed a new toilet, the collector would go memorize where the household is and figure out how to integrate it into their collection routes. So with COVID, we suddenly were at a very significant risk of not being able to do our collections if we had multiple collectors, get sick or needing to quarantine at the same time. The other major impact of COVID, which I'm not going to really delve into today, is we needed to really change the way our customers and staff interacted to minimize the risk of transition in our face-to-face contact. But I'm going to focus on that first risk today of our field operations. Next slide. So in order to address this risk, we actually built on an existing research project we were working on with an organization called DataKind. And the original goal of that research project was to help us optimize our collection routes for scale. So with our collectors kind of going to each new house and memorizing it and figuring out where to put it on the route, that was manageable when we were installing kind of 20 or new 30 households every month. As we're looking towards installing 20 or 30 new toilets every day, that becomes less manageable. And so we were looking for a way to, develop efficient collection routes that we could do as we scale. And so the DataKind software produces route lists and route maps, as you can see there on the right-hand side, that use our household GPS points to kind of plot the most effective routes. And we ended up deciding to integrate this information into TaroWorks so that it became a really easy to use job for our collectors to be able to navigate these new routes. Next slide. So it's a bit of a kind of back and forth between the different systems. So, you know, we start with TaroWorks and with collecting the household GPS point that then is synced into TaroWorks. So every time we want to kind of update or optimize a route, we download all of that GPS data from Salesforce, and then we take it over to DataKind and upload it there. Then DataKind kind of does its thing and optimizes the routes for us and produces a downloadable Excel file that we then upload back into Salesforce. So each customer record gets assigned a route number as well as a household order on that route. Then we sync the collector's telephones with TaroWorks. And then the last step is that they use a TaroWorks job to access turn-by-turn directions in maps.me so that they can locate each household, even if it's a household that they've never been to before. Next slide. So these are just some quick screenshots to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. So in the first shot, the collector is choosing which route they're collecting. Then in the second screenshot, they're selecting the household. So they would start obviously with household number 1, the first household on the route, and then they proceed through the different households as they go. Once they've selected the household that they're navigating to, as you can see, it pulls up some basic information, which I've blacked out just so I'm not sharing any private customer data. But then the collector would go to view record on map. Next slide. And so that opens up maps.me, and you can see the kind of little green dot there. I've tried to make it a bit more noticeable. And then the collector would use the route to function in maps.me to get turn-by-turn directions to arrive at that household. And that was a really key component for us, is that we found kind of when they were just working from the maps alone, they really kind of struggled with the navigation. And so having the turn-by-turn directions in maps.me really is what made this function very well for us. Once they arrive at the household, they flip back to TaroWorks, and you can see there they enter a bit of basic data, the number of containers they're collecting, if there's any comments from the customer, if there's a complaint or anything that our customer service agents may need to follow up on. If they arrive there and actually see that the GPS point isn't so spot on, they can take a new GPS point. So they just collect some very basic information in that job. And then when they return back to our depot at the end of the day, they sync all of the data that they have collected. And so this has been a really kind of a silver lining for us, because we really kind of pushed to get this implemented because of the risk of COVID and the risk to our field operations. But this actually has really assisted our operations in a lot of ways, really kind of optimizing those collection routes so that they are as efficient as possible. The house by house container collection data has yielded some really interesting analysis for us. So this has actually turned out to be a really big positive. So I guess if there's any upside to our current global situation, that's one for us. So that's it for me. Thank you, everyone. And I have put our kind of online presence there if you want to follow us.
Great, thanks, Erica. This is awesome. Very inspiring. I can definitely see how this is useful, and hopefully beyond the pandemic as well. So this is great work. If you have any questions, please post them into the questions section, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Curious, Erica, how long does the process take to upload the information into DataKind and get the results?
It depends on how both kind of how dense the our customer base is in a given neighborhood, how many routes are running there. So the whole process, the optimization, the software itself runs for about 30 minutes to do the optimization, during which time we don't have to do anything. The active staff time can be anywhere from kind of 20 minutes to an hour and a half, based on kind of, we are discovering that some neighborhoods are better mapped than others. And so as we've started this process, Maps.me runs on OpenStreetMap. So we actually have, sent out our teams with GPS, so that, we can put in new roads where they're missing. And so, we're still doing lots of those kind of improvements, to some of our areas. So that bit varies.
Great. Okay, and then we have a question from Jamila, which is, where is the data stored?
So all of our data is stored in Salesforce. The data kind optimization runs in, it's kind of stored in Amazon Web Services, but we don't store our customer data there. We just kind of temporarily upload a file of data that we've downloaded from Salesforce. So all of the data really lives in Salesforce.
Great, and also I will say that because Soil is a TaroWorks user, TaroWorks is directly integrated with Salesforce, so all the data comes in and out of that Salesforce system.
Exactly, yeah, and that's what's crucial for us, because it's getting those routes and household orders into Salesforce that then makes the TaroWorks job possible, which then makes the Maps.me navigation possible, because it's that necessary step of saying, okay, here's your whole list. You want to go one by one, be able to see the information and enter information at each household and be able to kind of navigate in between. So that's been a really important piece for us.
Great. I have a good question coming in from Robin. Have you seen any improved operational efficiency or duration from formalizing these routes, maybe in like the number of households visited or how long it takes?
Exactly. So one of the things that I mentioned is that we're collecting container data per household. And we kind of assume, the average household of our customers uses 2 containers per week. Well, as it turns out, there's actually some pretty significant variability. And some households give us 4 and some give us 1. And so understanding that container data has allowed us to say, okay, we want to hit as many households as possible in an as efficient way as possible. And so we're making sure that our vehicles are always coming back full. So they're able to squeeze in as many households as they can based on this container data that we've collected. So it's made those routes, it's definitely increased the average number of households that we're able to hit in a single route.
That's amazing. Great work. And thanks for sharing. We have a couple more questions, but I'll try to reach out to you afterwards. I want to move on to the next presenter. So thanks, Erica.
My pleasure.
Great. And then next up, we have Alicia Oberholzer. Alicia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound great. Go for it.
Hi, I'm Alicia Oberholzer. I am currently Solar Sisters Impact Associate. So I'll give you a little introduction to Solar Sister. We're a women-led social enterprise, and we invest in local women's clean energy entrepreneurship. And currently we are operating in Tanzania and Nigeria, but we have plans of expanding to other countries across sub-Saharan Africa in the future. And so essentially we support local African women to create sustainable businesses which spread clean energy to their communities and beyond. Next slide, please. And so you may be asking why off-grid clean energy and why the focus on women's entrepreneurship. So to give you a little background, if you're not familiar with the energy access realm, globally around 800 million people don't have access to electricity, and an additional 2.8 billion don't have access to clean or safe cooking, that's approximately a third of the world's population. And a lack of reliable, affordable energy access actually disproportionately affects women in the rural context, since they're often the ones bearing the burden of fuel collection, cooking, and taking care of the children at home, which oftentimes requires using harmful kerosene lighting. And so we have combined women's entrepreneurship and clean energy access. And so next slide. A little bit about how our implementation cycle works. So the Solar Sister team, and here I'm mainly referencing our business development associates, which in the context of this webinar can be considered our field staff, our main field staff, go into communities to recruit, train, and support Solar Sister entrepreneurs. And then they're able to get a variety of certified clean lighting and cooking products from us. And our business development associates also provide Solar Sister entrepreneurs with ongoing monthly training and mentorship on important business and life skills, anything from financial literacy to goal setting. And then once they have products, they go back out into their communities and sell them to customers using mainly word of mouth and various marketing techniques and trust networks. And then this allows them to generate an income and ultimately improve their livelihood. And then lastly, their communities benefit from the ripple effects of the clean energy, from improved health, from no longer having to read under harmful kerosene lighting, to reduce financial stress from no longer having to purchase kerosene. Next slide. And as you can imagine, COVID has definitely had a tremendous impact on our organization, especially considering that our business model is heavily reliant on in-person activities. So as an example, a lot of our Solar Sister entrepreneurs receive their products by hand from business development associates, and the business development associates are oftentimes like taking these products to rural, remote communities via foot. And so closures and movement restrictions essentially led to a halt in in-person activities, including our in-person trainings. These are now slowly resuming because movement restrictions and closures are being lifted in the countries that we operate in. But we've also experienced supply and distribution issues. And then, of course, the economic toll has led to really poor cash flow in the communities that we live in. So our current customers are way more focused on getting food on the table right now than per se buying clean energy products. And so just to demonstrate this, I have a quote from a Solar Sister entrepreneur in Nigeria. She reported to us, because of the lockdown, people are afraid to buy products. They're more interested in feeding than anything else. And the ban on gatherings has also affected my business, and everyone is afraid. So yes, various impacts. And then you can go to the next slide. So our immediate response was kind of an emphasis on listening and information gathering first, so that we can make evidence-based decisions. And so we used TaroWorks to do a few surveys at the very beginning. So first we evaluated things like mobile phone ownership across our entrepreneurs and the availability of different product delivery methods, because we wanted to see, like, is it even feasible to do virtual trainings if not all of our entrepreneurs didn't own mobile phones, and that wouldn't be possible. And we also conducted a survey with one of our partners, Energia, to see how entrepreneurs have been affected by COVID-19 and ask them what their greatest needs are right now, so that we can make more informed funding asks for grants that we've been applying to. And then this kind of sparked the start of what we call the Solar Sister Entrepreneur Listening Project. And this entails checking in with a few entrepreneurs on a weekly basis to kind of create a feedback loop to see what new challenges they're facing, since it's changing from week to week, and how we can address those. And on the right, you can just see 2 questions that were asked on one of our surveys. You can see that a majority of Solar Sister entrepreneurs were very worried about COVID and have been greatly impacted by it. Okay, next slide, please. And then some of the immediate actions we've taken is since in-person activities are resuming now, we've been making a great effort to deliver PPE to all of our staff and entrepreneurs so that they can interact in person as safely as possible. We've also partnered with healthcare facilities and workers to distribute solar lighting systems to facilities without access to electricity. And then thirdly, during all the lockdowns and closures, we invested a great amount of time into moving all of our trainings and mentorship online using WhatsApp and group phone calls. And so that entailed giving our business development associates extra phone credit so that they could provide extra support to entrepreneurs via the phone. And then this year, we were actually to roll out a business booster program with the aim of doubling entrepreneurs' businesses using training modules, peer-to-peer support, and a product credit program. And this program relied heavily on in-person activities at first. And so with the help of some consultants, we were able to move the training portion of the program into the virtual world by introducing bite-sized training modules. So these are really short training sessions that can be delivered via group phone calls. And the program is also supported by many TaroWorks jobs that are allowing us to track the training and beyond. And then the very last thing we did, main thing we did, was we also have introduced Mowgli SMS. And this is a native Salesforce app, and it allows us to send messages directly to entrepreneurs via Salesforce. They receive it on their phones as an SMS, so we can do things like short SMS surveys and send organization updates. All right, next slide, please. Hello.
Yes, I think which should be on the how solar sister entrepreneurs responded slide. Do you see that?
No, oh, now I do. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and so those actions were kind of taken at an organizational level. And then of course, solar sister entrepreneurs have also adapted their strategy. So they're the ones actually selling the clean energy products to the customers. And most of them were using in-person activities to do so, especially going to the markets and selling their products, which were closed during COVID. And so many of them have leveraged mobile technology and social media to market and sell their products. So I have a quote from a solar sister entrepreneurs who told us that I gathered my products on the floor with the lights on, and I turned on the light with the radio and did a recording of everything. Then I sent it to all of my contacts, and good enough, I got a great turnout. People were really attracted to my products. So they've been getting really creative with digital marketing and selling. You can see one of the banners that one of the solar sister entrepreneurs used to send to her customers via WhatsApp. They're also focusing on leveraging existing customer relations, and so like calling their customers to ask for referrals. And then where digital marketing selling hasn't been as effective, they've been trying more door-to-door marketing. And then lastly, some of them are offering customers installment payments, which means that the customer pays in chunks but doesn't receive the product until it's paid off, so it's less risky than just extending credit. All right, next slide. All right, and that's everything. Be sure to follow Solar Sister online if you want to stay up to date with us. We have lots of social media presence. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Alicia. Great. And I have a couple follow-up questions here. If you have any questions for Alicia, just type them in or raise your hand and I'll get to you. One question for you is, what challenges did you come across regarding access to virtual trainings? Anything, any issues with like internet or broadband access?
Yeah, so all of our virtual trainings so far have been over group phone calls because the survey that we did with the Solar Sister entrepreneurs basically told us that not all of our entrepreneurs, especially in Tanzania, have access to smartphones and especially no access to Wi-Fi. And so we've been using group phone calls to do trainings. And it has been really challenging because it's so different from in-person meetings, but it has worked for the time being.
Great. Another question, this one from Eveline. Are you delivering virtual trainings to groups or individual customers with mobile phones?
Yes, so normally our monthly trainings with the Solar Sister entrepreneurs are what we call sisterhood meetings, and they're done in groups. But now that we have moved to phone calls, there have been more one-on-one mentoring sessions, but many of the trainings still happen via group phone call, not only one-on-one.
Great. And did you use a consultant to convert your trainings to be virtual?
Yes, so for this specific Business Booster program, which is being piloted with 100 entrepreneurs across Tanzania and Nigeria, we did hire 2 consultants, which helped us convert our original training modules into bite-sized training modules to be delivered virtually.
Okay. Were they individual consultants or is it like a consultancy
They
that
were,
you there?
Yep, they were individual consultants, and if you're interested in receiving their contact info, I'm more than happy to connect you. They've been fantastic.
Great. Thank you very much, Alicia. Okay. If you have any follow-up questions, please continue to type them in and we can circle back at the end as well. Okay, so finally, we have our last presenter, Jessica at Solidaridad Network. Jessica, are you there?
Yes, Elaine. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining. Okay, so let me switch to your slide and go for it.
Great, thank you for having us. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on when you're joining us from. I'm going to talk first a little bit about our organization. Solidaridad is a social civil society organization. It's a global network. We were in our 50th anniversary last year, so we have a long trajectory. Currently, we have 8 different regions globally, and we work in more than 43 countries. We have a work that goes through value chains, 13 commodities. This includes fruits, vegetables, but some more controversial commodities like oil palm. We also work mining, textiles, cotton, aquaculture. So it's very broad the range that we have in agriculture, and it depends, of course, in the context and the area and the environment of the different regions. In our trajectory, we have supported the definition of certification standards like fair trade and UTC, which is now with the rainforest. We have also supported different route tables like Bonsucro and RSPO, which are the different certifications for good practices in social and environmental for the different commodities. We work with different supply chain actors and stakeholders, since our mission is to be able to make everything that we produce and that we consume sustainable, making it respect the environment and the other individuals around us, and also the future of next generations. And for this, we consider that even though the farmer is our central focus, we consider that is very relevant to integrate all different actors that can go from academy, input suppliers, buyers, mills, even the customer. The customer is very important now with all the interest that there is in protecting the environment. Next slide, please. So in one of the 8 regions that we have is Solidaridad Central America, which is the one that I am part of. I am the IT specialist for this region. We have 8 different specialists, 1 per region. So I'm going to focus in this presentation of the changes that we have faced with COVID. There are different mechanisms going around the globe, but I'm going to share specifically the ones for Central America. And in Central America, we focus mostly in Mexico, Guatemala, Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and some projects of sugarcane in Haiti and Dominican Republic. We work with 5 main commodities: coffee, cocoa, palm, palm oil, sugar, and livestock. Next slide, please. This is our global strategy. So we focus, as I mentioned, like our base is the producer, and related to the farmer, what we try to do mostly is to improve the good practices that they are doing in their farms, to increase their income, to increase the quality of their products, and also to protect the environment. Very related to this is a work in robust infrastructure. We have been trying to improve the conditions in what they have, the access to the different opportunities that they have. So for example, this can be financial services, infrastructure to transport the fruit or the products that they have. Then we have a different level, which is sustainable landscape, and this surrounds like all that comes from the producer and the infrastructure of a context. Then we have another action line that is enabling policy environments. And finally, markets, which is like the global intercommunication between different stakeholders. In the right, you can see like a type of a cartoon that I really like, and it's very representative on how we do things in Solidaridad and also in Central America. And it's that we give the methodology of sustainable landscape a high priority, because we feel that in order to be able to generate a sustainable change, we need to have the point of view of different people and the different stakeholders and members of a community. So here you can see in the cartoon that there's an elephant in the big picture, but from the different point of view, it can be a fan, it can be a snake, it can be a tree, a wall. So we think that this integration between all the stakeholders is very important. Next slide, please. So to talk a little bit more about the measures that we have had for COVID, our strategy for technology in Solidaridad has changed a lot in the past 3 years, with the definition of the mask or the methodology and strategy for the next 5 years. We decided that we wanted to become a data-driven organization, and this meant that an IT specialist was becoming part of each of the regions. And for our Central America strategy, we have like 2 lines of work. We have some apps that are desktop apps and mobile apps that are internally developed by Solidaridad. And then we have a very important part of our strategy, which is TaroWorks, the use of TaroWorks. And since TaroWorks is based or is a plugin for Salesforce, as it was mentioned before, we decided that we also wanted to link the different applications that we created to Salesforce to be able to use a unique ID and to be able to have traceability of all the information that we have for a farm or for a farmer. We also combine this with some satellite imagery, drones, and weather stations. And in this moment, we're working with nearly 59 organizations in Central America, 31 sugar mills, and 21 palm mills. So I'm going to show you some of the changes that we did. And in the right part of this slide, you can see like a big conclusion that we had. And is that the strategy that we have had to face these challenges has been mostly increasing the amount of users that we have in our tools and increasing the amount of content that we have available. Next slide, please. In this slide, we can see 2 biggest changes that we did. The first one is higher reach using leader farmers. So in the first part, it was how we were doing things. We were in agriculture and in social programs, as you know, it's very common to use personal trainings, group trainings, or field schools, and the methodology of learning by doing. So usually we were having like a technique that was in charge of maybe between 80 and 100 farmers, and dividing this in maybe 3 to 2 groups, depending on the location of this. And what we did is we create clusters. We divide in groups of 10, maybe 15, and we identify one leader farmer of this group and train him in the use of tools. So this changed completely the reach, and this allows us to have more information more frequent and to identify which are the pain points that our farmers are having during COVID. since we cannot go and visit them directly as we were used to do. So this means that we have had to provide access to internet and hardware to the communities. Before, what was happening was that the technique was doing the visit, and he was the one that had the tablet and the TaroWorks surveys or the mobile apps that we developed, and he was just walking around doing the field visit or the technical assistant visit and capturing the data, then analyzing and then taking action. But now these lead farmers are trained to use these tools. They have their tablet, they have a data plan, they have some spots to synchronize information if the connectivity in rural areas is complicated, and they are receiving training in providing recommendations real time when they visit the farmers. The second change that we did is we are shifting, or more like having a complement between the technique as a main user to a farmer as a main user. So it's very common in agriculture or in social projects to have the techniques or the extensionists being the ones that use the tools. These for many reasons that have been mentioned before, because access to connectivity, because the access of to smartphones is not very high in some areas. But we have, as I mentioned, trying to provide access to this hardware and internet. And we are trying to make the farmer to be able to use the tools that we develop, to be able to have information in real time, pop-up recommendations depending on the data that they provide. And this is a very big change for us. So this has helped us to reduce the dependency of farmers in the techniques visit, because now they are not happening as often as they were. And they also have a direct access to training material and results. For example, with the TaroWorks, besides collecting data, we can also disseminate information. So we created jobs in which they can see how to prevent COVID, how to contact help if they require, also some good agricultural practices, step-by-step guides on how to do things in the field. So this has helped us a lot. And specifically in Nicaragua, since you know, the government has not been as responsive with COVID as other governments, the information that farmers have in the rural areas regarding to COVID is almost inexistent. So we have been trying to fill this void, providing information and disseminating information using this type of hardware with the different farmers. Next slide, please. Also, we updated our offices infrastructure. So we used to do like the trainings in the field, and the office was only like the desks and that's it. But now they became type of interactive classrooms, virtual interactive classrooms, and in which we put like a TV, internet access, cameras, Polycon, to be able to have our techniques from their house, do trainings in small groups, and also to do the trainings of our leader farmers. Also, as you see in the right picture, we have taken some TVs and some access to internet and some of this type of infrastructure to different farms that are located centrally to surrounding farmers, so they can also get together and maybe plug in a USB that contains information or connect into a Facebook training. So this has been very innovative for farmers to be able to just get together and sit and watch on a TV the step by step on how to do things. We also have WhatsApp groups. You know that this is very important with farmers, and we have also shared, like as you see in the left, some weather information. We partnered with the Bioclimatica, and what they do is they provide this information of weather, but also they provide recommendations. So depending on the humidity or the temperature, they might be saying, with livestock, this is a difficult moment for different plagues, or for oil palm, this is a moment in which you could have a picudo disease. So we can also share this with our different farmers so they can take action. Next, please. Also, one measure that we have is increased use of data communities for decision making. Previously, we were using TaroWorks a lot for big surveys, like baseline, in which you have 6 different forms included in a job, and you have like 500 questions. but we identified now that which our lead farmers that we can use TaroWorks to make very quick and efficient surveys. It's very fast to create surveys and jobs in TaroWorks. So we decided to have a technical assistance, quick surveys to identify problems that they have had with transporting their fruit or maybe having access to inputs. And with this information, we create different dashboards in Salesforce that allow us to make decisions or to identify pain points. For example, in these images where you see that the line went down, you can see like that there was a moment in time in which farmers were having lower performance in the application of good practices. So we used some surveys to identify the causes of this. And we saw that as it's like when we go to a cooking class and we understand how the teacher did the prepare the plate, but then when you go to your kitchen, it's not that you remember everything. So this is the same with farmers. And this guided us in which were the content that we needed to prioritize to be able to disseminate using TaroWorks or sending PDFs in WhatsApp. We also trained our staff in the use of Salesforce, and we integrated this with SMS campaigns using like the list of our contacts, identifying which farmers don't have access to WhatsApp and sending SMS the recommendations that could help them to improve. Next slide, please. This is another example. These are like the type of surveys that the lead farmers are collecting every week. So they have a report on which were the pain points that they found, the problems that they found, and the recommendations that they left. So the technique can follow up on this. And if it's required to make a phone call to the farmer and provide extra details, we can see the performance of the lead farmers. And this has increased like the interaction between the organization and the communities, because before it was maybe only the technique and the community, but now they are having interaction with PMEL members, with IT members, with project managers. So I think that this has made closer the relationship between the organization and the communities. We have different levels of monitoring to assure data quality, and we can receive daily information. Before we were receiving maybe each 2 weeks or something like that. Next slide, please. Besides TaroWorks, we are launching new products to empower farmers. So we have created some easy to use apps like estimation of harvest for cocoa and oil palm, in which the farmer gets information on how to do this estimation, and he can go around the crop and just follow the instructions and get the result of this expected production of the next harvest, and some results on the changes compared to the previous one. And also some tools like a farm diary in which they can log in the daily activities that they do and receive recommendations. So this has generated new business models and make us see that we need to have a stronger collaboration in the IT area with the stakeholders to make these tools sustainable. Next, please. Finally, we have some platforms with the stakeholders, and we created some quick websites to have forums and to have trainings. These are for other type of stakeholders that are not farmers. This is more to have interaction with the mills, oil palm, sugar cane, and to interact with buyers and with other type of stakeholders, as I mentioned. So we have been using this a lot for enabling policies in this time that we have had more people having time to share in the desk. So we have been participating a lot in zero deforestation and the interpretation of RSPO in Nicaragua and Guatemala. And these websites have been very helpful to keep track on how these things are going. Next, please. This is a final slide in which you can see some of the results of the actions that we have done for COVID, and it's the amount of online workshops that we have had, the participation rate, also the increase in the groups of WhatsApp, the creation of high-speed tools using TaroWorks and Salesforce. We used to have like 24, now we have nearly 40. So we have been developing very fast. I really recommend, it's super easy and efficient. The WhatsApp groups, the participation of the farmers in the SMS campaigns, and also the amount of information that we get from the weather stations. Next, please. Thank you very much for listening.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica. It sounds like there's a lot of stuff that you guys have done, and a lot of it is actually bringing, or at least bringing communications closer. So that's really interesting. That's great to see. Great. So, oops, there was one more slide with your contact information and for Solidarity that. Let me just check if there are any questions here. Okay, Jessica, how did you find funding for the technology needed to do the digital trainings, virtual support during COVID?
That's a great question, because I think that one of the challenges that we have in general to take technology into agriculture or social projects is the budget. And I think that the budget came out from the field activities that we were not able to do. So we had planned like different exchange activities. We usually travel with some farmers from one country to another for them to meet other farmers and exchange experiences. We do some more field visits to test tools. So with these savings, we were able to bring technology and also sharing these concerns related to COVID with the different stakeholders. So since we work in the whole value chain, as I mentioned, we have been transmitting to big buyers like stakeholders that work with us, like Coca-Cola, Jaremar, different big mills, the importance of bringing technology into the field. And they have been on board with this based on the information that we can share with them that results from having these surveys and these visits using technology. But mostly it was the savings from field activities.
Great, thanks. And another question is, what tools were you using to do the analysis in? You had some great reports there. For your analysis, what tools did you use?
Okay, so to collect the data, we use the apps that we develop internally, like the harvest estimations, and additionally, we use the TaroWorks surveys. So we collect baselines, we collect the results of technical assistant visits, and all of this data goes to Salesforce. And in Salesforce, we create the different dashboards and reports that were reflected. There's also a feature in which you can create a community, and this is type of a website that can have a collection of dashboards, and that's like the type of reports that you saw, but it's completely using Salesforce.
Great. Okay, at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions across the board and for more general questions. And there was a question earlier that I think might be good for each of you, actually. The question was, how digitally literate do your staff have to be to use these tools, especially, Jessica, as you're moving toward having farmers use tools directly too? Like, how are you finding that? So maybe, Jessica, you can start.
Okay, yes, it has been challenging, mostly like the trainings, and what a lesson learned was that before jumping into the tool itself, you need to have like an introduction into the digital world, because for us, maybe a computer, a tablet, internet is very obvious, but there are many farmers that have never had interaction with internet or with a tablet. So this is the first step. What is an SMS? Because maybe you're saying we're going to start an SMS campaign and they don't even know what is SMS. So start by the basics. And then when they understand these basics, you go into the tool. It has been a challenge to train remotely. It takes longer time, but the response that we have had is very good. It's like, of course, it's very relevant for them to be able to at least read and write, even though we have been trying to create apps that use icons, graphic icons, so that people that don't fully read can get familiar with these icons when they see frequently the app. but the response has been very good. I think that once that they understand how things work digitally and how they understand the tool behaves and the objective of it is a very good response. TaroWorks is very easy to use. I have had experience working with farmers that have only primary education and that are between 18 and even 70 years that had never had a smartphone, and they understand it really well and they become very good users. So I think that the answer for me would be just reading and writing, and at the beginning a lot of patience, a lot of technical support, because you're going to have farmers writing you at 4 a.m., at 5 a.m., 11 p.m. asking questions, but then after the first month, you're going to see that things run very smoothly.
Great. Alicia or Erica, any insights there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, we had really thought through kind of our training methodology when we first adopted TaroWorks. And I think that is hugely important, because getting people to adopt the technology is going to be dependent on them feeling, capable and competent with it. And so I think it is something that's really, similar to what Jessica's saying, like it's really worth investing the time and resources to train people so that they get comfortable on, the basic things that you need them to be able to do.
I'll also give a plug. Erica actually did another webinar just about kind of adoption and how she trained her staff. And so I think it's really interesting. And so I might actually follow up, Jamila, and I'll share that with you. Alicia, sorry, you're about to say something as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to do not just single trainings at the time of onboarding a staff member, but to have continuous trainings and offering like one-on-one support. So if there's just like one person who's struggling with a TaroWorks job or something, I'll oftentimes have them like shoot me a WhatsApp and set up a one-on-one mentoring session with them. So I think like it's critical to provide regular updates, because even if someone learns something once, like it can oftentimes slip through the cracks. And then in terms of some like a huge challenge that we face is definitely that not all of our Solar Sister entrepreneurs are literate. So there's literacy gaps, which poses a challenge for, of course, this new SMS app that we've rolled out. But they have ways of still reading and responding to SMS by like asking a family member to read the SMS if they're literate. So yeah, but it's definitely very challenging.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Yeah, I think repetition goes a long way. I think, Erica, I want to circle back to you. I think you had some follow-up thoughts to a question from earlier.
Oh yeah, someone had asked about, had we seen efficiency gains, and I forgot to mention the really kind of big and exciting one, which is that we also shaved off an average of 10% the mileage of every route. So that was a really significant gain for us, because our vehicle kind of gas and maintenance costs are pretty significant. And so that was a really big improvement. And also want to say that the DataKind's operating principle is to make open source technology. So if this is something that others are interested in, if route optimization is important in kind of other people's work, I am happy to facilitate connections to DataKind so that others can kind of learn if they can adopt the software as well.
Yeah, that is awesome. Cool. And I just flipped to the last slide that has everyone's contact information if you want to follow up specifically about anything. And then just to wrap up, there's one question, follow-up question for you, Alicia, about the virtual modules that you've created. How are these virtual modules useful when there are group calls? And how are these virtual modules used?
Yes. So basically, We have the program that these modules are for is called the Business Booster program, and it's basically going to be rolled out in phases. We're starting with 100 of our solar sister entrepreneurs, and they had to apply to the program and have met certain criteria. Essentially, the objective of the program is to double their sales revenue based on 2019 sales. And so the training that goes along with that is basically providing new business skills that will help them formalize their businesses. So for example, we have a Finances for Growth module, which dives into financial literacy. And so all of the modules are aiming to improve their business skills. And basically the way that they've been created into bite-sized pieces is every module is broken down into several mini modules, so like a 30-minute phone call maximum. And it's not just this phone call that's happening, it's they are being sent materials that they'll download that like visual, they have workbooks as well, and different tracking tools that will allow them to do kind of like homework assignments. And they've been also assigned a peer, so they'll be working on these assignments with another solar sister entrepreneur, and then they'll also be provided additional mentorship by business development associates. So it's not like they're just doing this 30-minute training phone call and that's it. They're also being provided with specific activities to complete and being provided with follow-up mentorship. And we're hoping that these mini modules will help them implement the strategies that they're being taught when marketing and selling their products. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you. Okay, great. I think we're a little bit over, but I did want to give the panelists one way to kind of conclude. If you were to give 1 to 2 tips for those in the audience for how they should think about adapting processes or systems, what tips would you provide?
Okay, the first tip I would give is to get to know very well your audience or your users and clients to understand the context. Is a little bit related to the previous question on farmers adopting technology. And it depends a lot on the context. So if, for example, some colleagues in Africa, they need to use IVR because people have like the basic phones, or maybe they don't know how to read, so they are programming voice messages. But for example, in Mexico, we have a high amount of farmers that have digital literacy and have access to connectivity and internet, and this allows us to create more developed apps. So I think that the type of user that you're going to have is something that is going to determine the type of tool that you need. And also the communication channels is very important to let the users know, especially when they are farmers, that they are not going to do this process alone, that you're going to be working with them, that there are some support channels, that there is a WhatsApp group, that he's not the only one that is learning, that all of us are learning, and try to make it fun and interactive. We use some gamification. We created a character that is called Mariana, and she's a technical assistant, and she provides like some aids in the different stages of the application, so they know if they need help where to get it, or if they get stuck where to get a tip on how to move on. So I think that these two are the biggest advices I would give, like get to know your user to see which is the best adaptation that you could do to help him. And the second, to provide always support and let them know that we are all learning and that he is going to get the support he needs.
Great, thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, I would say my tip is to think about your systems, both kind of where you are today, but also where you will be or hope to be in a few years from now. You know, if you're kind of in a similar situation where you're looking to scale your impact and grow, to think about all of your systems with that growth in mind, so that you can avoid the kind of pitfall that we're in, which was, you know, tacking on new functions and systems as we go. So if you can kind of, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah, that's great. Alicia?
Could you repeat the question one more time? Sorry, cut out there. My internet
Oh, yeah.
died.
Sure. If you have one or two tips for the audience about how they should consider adapting operations and systems during this time.
Yeah, I think the main thing is looking at it from the user's end and evaluating what the users need, not necessarily what you think they may need, because oftentimes we want to push technologies on users that users may not actually want to use, and so just making it as user-friendly as possible and really customized to their needs is my tip.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Alicia. And at that point, I'd like to, just wrap up and say thank you so much to Erica, Alicia, and Jessica for sharing your insights with everyone. You guys are doing great work, and keep up the adaptations to continue your work. So keep it up, and thank you again.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thanks, everyone.
And thanks for the audience for joining. See you next time. Thanks all. Bye.